Good afternoon. Well, actually, we debated if it should be afternoon or evening, so we're right at the cusp. Thank you for joining us for the Explore the Arts Theater Look-In with the cast of South Pacific. Explore the Arts is a program of the Kennedy Center's Education Department, presenting lectures, classes, and discussions for adult audiences, both on-site and online. To find out more about Explore the Arts programming, visit us on the website kennedy-center.org/plus. I'm your moderator for today's Look-In, Leslie Jacobson. And now it's my enormous honor and pleasure to introduce the artists who are going to be participating with us. So first on my right is Carmen Cusick from Houston, Texas. And I will abbreviate the many credits of all these artists so we have more time to talk and answer questions. But she spent the last 2 years before joining the tour here playing Elphaba in Wicked. And Elphaba, you know, I pronounced it properly.
That's okay, that's the way Barley Sure
yes.
always says it.
No, but I pronounced it properly in the green room, so I'm nervous. Thank you. She's also spent a lot of her career in the United Kingdom. She's played the West End many times. Fantine and Les Miserables is her, that was right.
Fantine, yeah.
Fantine, okay. I've seen them all. Thank you. Is among a number of roles that she's played there. Christine, I know that's right, in Phantom of the Opera was also one of the roles that she played in the United Kingdom. And of course, Carmen plays Nellie Forbush in this production of South Pacific, so welcome.
Thank you.
And next to her is David Pittsinger from, who plays Emile de Becque in this production of South Pacific. He has many Broadway credits to his name, but I had the pleasure of seeing him.
Only one.
Only one?
Only
Okay,
one.
I was going to get to the opera. I was going to get to the opera stuff, but I thought perhaps. But I'll see. So I'm already making more mistakes than I'm going to get fired. No.
It's okay. We'll get through.
Okay.
We'll get through. We'll be fine.
Thank you. Anyway, I did have the pleasure of seeing David playing Emile de Becque at Lincoln Center, and I had the pleasure again of seeing him play it here at the Kennedy Center. But he does have most of his artistic career in opera, playing a number of roles for the Metropolitan Opera and for New York City Opera, including roles for the Met and Tosca, Don Carlo, The Rake's Progress, and many others, and for the City Opera, Don Giovanni from Don Giovanni, and Faust in several different takes on Mephistopheles in the opera world, plus many other credits. And in addition, David was named the Artist of the Year both at the New York City Opera Company and also at Pittsburgh Opera. And he has a master's in music from Yale University. Welcome, David.
Thank you. You didn't know?
No,
Oh.
I didn't know all that.
Okay.
You should read the program. For God's sakes. Doing some lovely work here.
Next is Jody Kimura, and Jody plays Bloody Mary in this production of South Pacific. She's done extensive work in regional theater, in musicals, including The World Goes Round and Spelling Bee, Jesus Christ Superstar, where she played the role of Mary Magdalene, and Aldonza from The Man of La Mancha, and a number of other roles, and we're really happy to have her here now. Welcome.
I would like to say,
What?
I am originally from Hawaii. So
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Any fellow Hawaiians out there?
It wasn't in the program.
I know. I kicked myself.
And actually, I don't know where Anderson is from either, but you'll tell us afterwards. Finally is Anderson Davis, who plays Lieutenant Joseph Cable. He has a number of credits from Broadway, including being in the 2006 revival of Les Mis. and a lot of regional work as well on all coasts, up in Boston, over in Portland, Oregon. See, I said that correctly. Anderson has a BFA in drama from Carnegie Mellon, and he is originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So welcome.
Thank you.
Well, that's always the part of these programs that I become the most nervous about, because I'm always afraid of saying the credits incorrectly, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, but we're going to spend about 45 minutes having a conversation up here, mostly listening to the artists here who are with me, and then we'll spend about 15 minutes answering some questions that you might have in the audience. So I wanted to just very briefly put something out contextually and then see what you all have to say about it. One of the things that I think is particularly unique about theater, and live theater in particular, is that it allows an audience to experience several different time periods historically simultaneously. So we could see Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, which was written in the Elizabethan world. It was about an event that happened in ancient Rome, and it might be set, like Orson Welles set it in Mussolini's Italy, so then it would be set in the 1930s, but somebody might see that production today. So we'd be experiencing the late 1500s, 44 BC, maybe the 1930s, and 2011, all simultaneously. And that gives us the opportunity to really see how the world has changed and how it hasn't, what ideas we've abandoned and what cultural ideas we've discarded, and also what things are still the same today. And so I was thinking about this idea in terms of South Pacific, because South Pacific is a play based on a book about World War II in the South Pacific by James Michener. It was produced in the late 1940s in New York, and now we're all watching it in 2011, although it actually went into its original production, revival production at Lincoln Center a couple of years ago. So there are a lot of different ideas that have, and a lot of ways that society has changed over those years from the 1940s to 2011. And if this play were being written today, it might be very, very different in the way that the various people in it are depicted. And yet it works so amazingly in the present. So I wanted to turn things over to you all now and ask you how you approached this, knowing that there are things about this play that are problematic in the modern world, that the way some of the characters are depicted might not be the way they're depicted now, and just how you sort of dealt with that and embraced that.
Well, it was actually here in DC for the first time I got an interview question from a very astute reporter you have here at the Express, who her first question to me was, how does it feel, or did you have any reservations about playing a character that is so sort of stereotypical? And I thought that was a really brave question, and she wrote a great article as a result. But it's such an interesting question to me, because in some ways it is so different, and in some ways not. And in terms of Bloody Mary, the character I play, she's a Vietnamese immigrant. She would not speak any differently today, learning English from a bunch of sailors, than she would have then. So the question is, was it racist to portray her that way and sort of laugh at her, which I don't think people do at all. I think they laugh with her because she's so smart and fun. And but the desperation, the circumstances of her situation occur today, where people do what they need to do to survive. and make sure their children survive. So in some ways it hasn't changed, but
I get that question a lot, and the thing is, we're playing in a very specific era where that's how people felt. I came from a small town. Nellie Forbush came from a small town, and at that time there were we didn't apologize for who we were. We just were. Now we do understand what's politically correct to feel and think and speak. But at that time, there were no apologies. We're playing the era, and that's what Bartlett Sher has been so brilliant in bringing back. And the whole rehearsal process was difficult because we really had to let go of the guilt and realize that was the era, that was the time, and there were no apologies. That's just the way they thought. You know, as hard as it is for us to chew on and gulp down, that's the truth. And Bart wanted to bring the truth, the varied colors, and as dark as it gets, he wanted to bring the dark truth back to life. And that's why the South Pacific is a South Pacific that you've probably never seen before.
Anytime that you're doing a piece for the stage, be it opera, straight theater, musical theater, concert, whatever it is, the material in this case is so rich and so iconic. And there are so many people that have come before us to interpret it. You know, all we can do is perceive it in our realities. In other words, it's that empty space that you come to it that Peter Brook always talks about, where you allow yourself to inhabit a character, and as Carmen said, in the time frame. And otherwise it would be, you know, it would be incredible to think of writing shows like 1776, which, you know, when did that come out? In the 1970s, I think, or something like that? 60, yeah. So, you know, and it was written for a specific time period.
Absolutely.
And therefore, you know, to depict the reality of the situation and the characters and to inhabit the characters only makes them come to life if you do it in the elements in which they were written in, which, you know, Michener, of course, it's loosely based on specific characterizations, but I mean, certainly the history, the American history is all there. But needless to say, we're portraying, you know, characters in his mind's eye, along with Josh Logan, who wrote the book for South Pacific. And, you know, all we can do is you know, allow that to happen with the chemistry that we all have. And it's different when there are changes made to our cast. You know, the interactions are different, and just like we can't apologize for that, we can't apologize for the period that the material was written to portray. It's historical, and because it's historical, it's iconic. And I think that, you know, they didn't make apologies then. They stood by the work on the page, and I don't think any of us feel anything but a gratitude to have the opportunity to not apologize and to play this in a correct fashion.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that, I think the further you get beyond when an original production was done, in this case 1948, the more filters, sort of cultural filters, get put in, right? And so I think one of the real successes of this production is to tear those filters away and get back to the original material. And one of the ways that I know Bart did that was to reinstate some of the cut material in the script. There's a couple little instances where they deemed this, for example, when Nellie says the word colored to refer to Emile de Becque's previous wife. That word in 1948 was just deemed too controversial to say on a stage at that time. I also say a line when Nellie asks me, you know, they say it never works, right? And she's referring to a life between two races or two different cultures, because I'm asking, why can't I marry this girl? And I said, yeah, they do say that, and then everybody does their damnedest to prove it. And that line was completely taken out before they opened in New York in 1948.
So they were ahead of their time. They just couldn't.
So far ahead of their time, to the point where they had to be like, I don't know if we should go that far, you know? So what's really brilliant is that in this production, you actually are hearing lines that were written for the original production that were never heard. And in these ways, I think you tear away some of those filters and some of the political correctness that keeps us from being able to show how it really might have been. And so that was really exciting. to know that in some ways you're doing a really original material for the first time. And I think that was one way to reach back in an honest way and portray them.
Your song, Carefully Taught, was often a problem with producers. They didn't want that.
The original tour, they cut it.
Yep.
When the original tour, I guess this probably would be in the late
early,
50s at that point, they were forced to cut the song, You've Got to Be Carefully Taught, which, if you haven't seen the show, is about how you're taught to be racist or to be prejudiced against certain things, and it's not born into you. For example, I think the first production that they did in the South was in Atlanta, I believe, and it was they had to cut the song just in order to do the show. And I think singing that song is very strange because you feel both how far we've come and also how relevant it still is.
Right.
You know, so it can be sort of hopeful because you can see how far we've come, and also a little bit disheartening because of how relevant it still is. You know.
Right.
So it's an amazing kind of journey to see how far it's come.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for me, to be able to play a character in this way that Bart directed, to not water down at all, you know, Bloody Mary, and she doesn't have to be this sort of, you know, like Juanita Hall's portrayal, which was fantastic, but very warm and sweet, and, you know, in this production, Bart's vision was much more about her reality and her desperation, and her as a real person, so, you know, that's very contemporary in a way, too.
Well, and actually the way the sailors interact with you as well, because they're pretty harsh with you. And that's just a reminder that that's what
That's how it
was
was.
going on.
Right.
And actually, they wanted them to cut You've Got to Be Taught before the show opened on Broadway.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And,
Oh, yes.
and Hammerstein said, I'm not doing this show if we don't have that
And
song.
what's interesting is that you can tell in the writing of the music that there's no ending to that song. It bleeds like very quickly into the next song.
Right.
So there's no time for the audience to react.
It's all one musical scene, right? To the
Yeah.
end
Very
of This Nearly Was
cleverly done.
Mine.
It's very clever. If
Through
you
composed.
listen to it,
Right.
it goes, you know, you've got to be carefully taught, last note, right? And then we're right into the next song. Like, keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I feel that when I sing it, you know, that I feel them writing it, you know, and them, you know, quickly going into the next bit, so there's no reaction.
Right.
So your subtext is, don't leave.
Yeah.
Wait, there's more.
Right.
Well, and what's, you know, they wrote it so soon after World War II.
Absolutely.
That's really pretty amazing. And we just had Senator Inouye from Hawaii come see the show, and he was in World War II. And,
Yes.
you know, I was a little worried about him hearing Jap, you guys say Jap, and, you know, it was such a, wow, so revolutionary at that time.
And it was also written, before our country was going through some of its own
Yes.
revolutionary.
Yes.
What, 15 years before civil rights? I mean,
15 years before civil rights, and it's one of the reasons that early on in the composition of this piece, that Getting to Know You, which was later stricken from this show and used in The King and I, was originally written for when Bloody Mary, Jody sings Happy Talk, and so they were sort of
my song?
and it was getting, you know, grittier and grittier in the sense that they weren't making any apologies when they were writing this. And as a matter of fact, just last week, they were here and I saw pictures of a new portrait that will enter the National Portrait Gallery here of Richard Rodgers, writing in a restaurant, Bali High. And Josh Logan came in, and most of the show had been written. And Josh Logan said, I need a song here, and this is on Bali
a
High.
napkin, was it?
He staved it out on a
Love those
napkin.
stories.
And anyways, the portrait is beautiful. And it was presented to Mary Rodgers on her 80th birthday this past Monday, and will arrive in the National Gallery soon.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting, too, because Hammerstein had a long history of being interested in social injustice and trying to correct it. Showboat, of course, was his show that he wrote with Jerome Kern, and that's based on an Edna Ferber novel, but it turns on an interracial marriage, actually, between Julie and her husband, along with a bunch of other things. And of course, you've got Old Man River, and that also, interestingly, had some revisionist lyric changes that happened in the intro to that over the years. But I think what you're saying, which makes so much sense, is that seeing this work as it was intended to be permits us actually to check in with ourselves about whether things have changed or not, or how much they've changed. I mean, just as you're saying. And that's, again, I think, a rich gift that the arts gives us by affording us that opportunity. I was curious, since you have been on tour, this production has been on tour from Lincoln Center for 1.5 years. Who has been with it for that whole time? Has anyone?
All of us.
All? Oh,
No,
Except
not me.
okay.
But close enough.
But yes. Well, so what's it like in different parts of the country, and how do we stack up here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you guys would say, but it's been incredible, right? I mean, I know you have a story about being in Arkansas, but I'll tell my story about being in Philadelphia. My character, you know, is set in the Philadelphia main line, which at the time was like it was like the nobility in a way of America at the time. And so I have a lot of strange references to that era that only people in that region really pick up on. So it was very fun for me to basically do this show for a year with crickets every time I mentioned the main line.
That's not true.
It's true. I mean, it's not their fault.
Comparatively.
It's kind
Not a
of
funny line.
no. It's not unless you know exactly what the time period was and where this guy came from.
Yeah.
And so it was very fun, you know, being in Philadelphia where they were responding vocally, you know, to my references and how different, you know, the Philadelphia main line was to, say, Little Rock, Arkansas. So it's been very different all over the country.
Don't you think that would be one of the things that they probably would have always gotten in the time period?
Oh yeah.
Because at the
Really?
because it was such a
I think I even say I'm from Ardmore, and then he says just outside Philadelphia. But I believe that people would have recognized it without saying just outside of Philadelphia. You know,
Right.
the whole time would have known that area much better.
That scene between Anderson and I, Cable and Bloody Mary, about him being from Philadelphia, and I go, was that Philadelphia? Lasted about a half an hour. It was so, I was like looking at the head, trying to, you know, they just went crazy every time you said Philadelphia.
Yeah.
They were like screaming like we put the word in for them.
Yeah.
We
And Carmen,
changed
you had
the
a
name.
similar experience, right, when you were in Fayetteville. Remember that?
Well, the first time I said colored in San Francisco, which was where we opened, there was this, you know, because they'd, you know, initially fallen in love with Nellie, and then, she's a bigot. And then the further kind of south we got, and some of the more rural areas, there would be a few, but some would be, and then realize, oh, that's not right. You know, it's crazy, that especially in that bit where people just are not expecting it, and it comes out of nowhere, and they're shocked, they're stunned, they're uncomfortable, and so I think I would like to say that everyone was uncomfortable when they laughed about it at that point, but you know, when you are uncomfortable, you make these weird noises at times. So, as I'm probably doing right now, but so yeah, that always gives a very different reaction.
It's generational
depending on-
too, you know, in the sense that, you know, the younger generation, you know, we've seen 4 generations of people see the show: great-grandparents, grandparents, you know, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and you see them out there, and you know, in response to something like that, you know, it's different in every city. Depends where you are.
Really is.
It depends on the demographic of the audience. Some kids hear it and they think, huh? You know, what? What is that? You know, and then, you know, people who, you know, remember the political correctness as things changed, you know, over time would be, you know, or some people would be, ooh. You know, so the reactions are very different and affect people very, very differently. I mean, in a situation like Lincoln Center, where the audience is closer than this first row is, you know, you get people commenting on it. You'd hear them, oh, I don't like that. You know, and be like, well, hang on a minute, you know. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And you become sort of protective and proprietarial of the people that you're on stage with, because it just gets a little blurred.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody on stage looks cross-eyed at her, I feel like, popping them. And it's something that develops, I think, over time. But it's funny because reactions, I don't know how you felt about it here, but the audiences have been very different here, responding to different things. But the fact is that they're responding, and we feed off that.
Right.
And it doesn't change our characters, but it can definitely take a performance a different route and give it a different flavor. And that's a really great thing. That's why after so many hundreds of performances of this that we've all done, it's every night it's a new audience.
Yes.
And a lot of
It's a
them have
new
never seen
experience.
it before. It's brand new.
Yeah, wonderful. The people who originated these roles are somewhat iconic because this broke all box office records for the longest running show on Broadway for many, 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 many years. And I'm just curious, you've made these roles so wonderfully your own. I mean, there's no question of that. But did the ghost of Mary Martin ever come and visit you at night? Or, you know what I mean? Was that something you had to put aside, or did you not even think about it?
Well, for me,
Or, yeah, I mean, anyone, but,
oh, sorry. Oh, there's my mic.
yeah,
Sorry.
right. Aitzia.
I hadn't seen any really of Mary Martin until we got to the rehearsal process, and he just played this one little bit. And it's strange because I get compared that I have a similar interpretation to hers quite often. I think, and I've been asked, did you study her? I did not. I did not study her. But we did both come from, well, I did most of my
Texas.
training in Houston, Texas. She's from Texas. And maybe that has a little flair of something that's similar. But I went into this having no idea that I would get. I didn't think I'd get cast for this part at all. I've seen it done in London, and as much as I adored the part, it was played in quite a naive, sweet way. And yes, she is sweet, but I just saw her differently. And although it was a total winning formula that Bart came up with in Broadway, and I thought I was blown over by that production at the Lincoln Center. It was the best I'd never seen in South Pacific like it, because he didn't apologize. He really brought into what we just spoke about, so I won't go there. But I saw something that I wanted to do with the part that I just thought, I hope he goes with me on this. And he did. He gave me such freedom, and because I see her as, first of all, I see her as a bit of a Southern belle. She is from Arkansas, and she has this charm, this Southern charm about her that is more knowing than I think I've seen it interpreted before. Yeah, I'm speaking in the movie, in the Pittsinger, and I really wanted to put my own stamp on it, and Bart, even knowing that he had a winning formula, really allowed me that creative freedom, and he gave me such a gift.
Wonderful. Anyone else care to respond to that?
One way that I know Bart helped me. One of the first things he said to me was that Cable was the hardest part to direct and to cast. Because I think mostly because it's so underwritten. He says, 2 lines to this girl, and they're in love with each other, and they're rolling around the floor and talking, and then he's suddenly talking about racism and all these big ideas. So everything happens very quickly. And one of the ways, even though this is an iconic musical, I think, was to figure out where did this guy really come from, if he truly was a real person. And there obviously were a lot of guys like him in history. And so we talked a lot about it, and there's speculation that these kind of guys, first lieutenants in the Marines at this time, of course it's a little bit of a stretch, the plot, but there were guys who went on these fairly solitary missions. And this, it's speculated, was the beginning of the CIA. Because so this is all like just for me, really, in my head. Nobody's going to go, oh, he's playing a guy who's about to start the CIA. I don't know. But it was helpful just to know where he came from. and to let go of the, you know, young leading man in an old musical thing. Because it's written for him to come in and say all the right lines and sing all the right songs and to just kind of stand around and look nice. But it was much more fun for me and for Bart, I think, to really dig into where he came from. Recently, I don't know if you guys saw the HBO series The Pacific. It was the Pacific side of Band of Brothers, and it was so fun for me. This was actually already during the performances of our tour. But it was so fun for me to kind of sit during intermission and watch, you know, these shows and to really dig into the reality of the time. And for me, that was a way to separate myself not only from previous performances, the movie and the original, and even from Matt Morrison, who originated it at the Lincoln Center, but just to like really dig into the real guys and what they were. And even though you're, you know, singing songs, which is a bit of a stretch for a Marine. Well, I don't know. Maybe they love musical theater, you know. I don't know. But yeah, singing Marine. But at the same time, you have to commit to it. And one of the ways for me was to commit to the reality of the situation.
See, he really started the USO, not the CIA. And by the way, Bart told me that Emile was the most difficult part to cast and to direct. So, could somebody get him on the phone, please?
Jody, you referenced Juanita Hall for a moment, and I'm just curious.
Well, that's interesting. You know, she did such a great job in the movie, and she's so famous and made Molly High so famous, won a Tony. And yeah, I think for me, the struggle just as an actress was to allow myself to be that dark and be that sort of border on unlikable when she was so likable and so warm, and that's how I like to be as a person. So Bart, you know, and Sarna, his assistant, had to sort of really help me be courageous enough to put forth this Mary that was much more desperate and dark. But what I'm really proud of is to sort of bring on kind of more of the Asian flavor, because she is, you know, she's from Tonkin, China, which a lot of people. You know, I think because of Juanita Hall's portrayal, that she's often seen as this South Pacific Islander, you know, a Pacific Islander versus Asian. So she is an Asian immigrant from Tonkin, China, which is currently Vietnam. So, yeah, I'm really proud of that, to be able to bring that flavor to it and that interpretation to it. But no pressure.
David, do you have anything you'd like to throw in about, as a wonderful opera singer yourself, but stepping into the role of, you know, another famous opera singer?
It's this piece for me is as operatic as it gets. You know, Anderson was talking about how you've got to be carefully thought. It's through composed, right through the end of This Nearly Was Mine. It's one scene. And it's, fondly enough, I mean, it's why Cable and Anderson in this production is on stage that whole time, where it's like one long sort of duet. It's a discussion about our lives and a commentary, you know, of the situation that we're in. And you know, when I came to this, I had never seen the movie. Had never seen a production of it, but of course had heard Ezio Pinza sing, and I had heard Giorgio Tozzi record it, and Justino Diaz, all the Latin men trying to do a Frenchman. So, whatever. But that being said, when I came in, aside from sort of having a great reverence and respect for Ezio Pinza, the piece resonated deep within me too, musically. I came from it because Emile is characterized more by what he sings and how he sings it than what he says. He says some important things, but he always gets the accent on the wrong syllable, and he's struggling with it, struggling with his own, you know. But when he sings, it's clear how he feels, and to me. And Bart told me very early on, he said, listen, he said, I've seen you in the opera plenty of times. Love your work, love your work. But I want you to find your way into this character with the elements of your own life. And then he went right for the jugular, and he said, you know, you have a wife of ethnicity, you're the age of the character, you have 2 children, the age, twins, the ages of Nagana and Jerome. You're a Francophile, you speak the language, you've lived in France for the better part of 20 years. Go. Just go.
Wow.
And then it was very different than what my predecessor on Broadway had done. And he came to me one day and he said, look, he said, this is great. He's my Maurice de Chevalier and you're my Hemingway, and you go that direction. And then 2 weeks ago, you know, he came here to give us a sort of, you know, touch up and said, forget everything I said. Let's, you know, start over again, because it's always a work.
Yes.
It has to live,
Yes.
you know. And
Stay organic.
I got it, you know. But it's been working with these people. They don't feel entitled. Like some of the opera singers that I work with, you know, they feel a real entitlement to their career and these people are the hardest working, most talented people, bar none, that I have ever had the joy and honor to sing with, and they've become like a family to me. In spite of the fact that I don't get to be with my family, this is my family right now, and it's I'm so grateful, and I really have a deep affection for them all.
Wow. I think we'll get the mic set up now, and people can begin to line up if you have some questions. But while that's being set up, I just was going to maybe ask one more question. I wanted to say first, as someone who has had the opportunity of seeing it twice, but particularly of seeing the production here with all of you in it, that each of these characters has a fierceness to them, and a darkness, and also a great warmth and beauty. You know, when I look at Mary, what I think of isn't how harsh she is, but what kind of a life she had to lead that turned her into this person. Yeah. And Cable, again, I think the fact that there's darkness as well as her heroism makes us believe you've been through war. You know, again, this isn't like the Pirates of Penzance or something, you know, where they're pretend. Yes, I know. I think that's why it came to mind. These aren't pretend anything. These are real men who lived, you know, through hell. But the thing that I just see afresh is the love story between the two of you. I mean, I just think it might be one of the most beautiful love stories that's ever been depicted on stage. And going through, especially particularly the way that you both portray it, and going through all of the agonies of that and the final resolution of that. And that last moment with the hand, and you know, I mean, it's just, you know, how many of you have seen it already here? Oh. How many of you have yet to see it here? Okay, well, I defy you not to cry.
This weekend's it, so get your tickets.
Yeah, and I guess, is there anything, is the mic set up? Oh, there it is, okay. So as people have some questions, why don't you start to line up? And while you're doing that, anything that you would like to say about the evolution of this love story as you've played it? You had a different Nellie. How many times?
I've had 8.
8 different Nellies. Okay. So, you have it on Bluebeard. So,
right. 8 doors.
That's right. So for you, how do you feel that things have changed for this production, and for you as Nellie, you know, I can see it's easy to fall in love with him, but how did you fall in love with him?
Easy to fall in love. It's easy to fall in love with her. I mean, when my wife saw us for the first time, and she had seen it probably 10 or 15 times with several different Nellies on Broadway, and the first time she saw me with Carmen, she sort of reiterated a worry that she had when she saw me on Broadway, which was, is this going to be a problem? And I said, Carmen, she really likes us. She really thinks we're good together.
She's a hottie, let me just say.
So it's just, I think it's, you know, I've done more performances with Carmen than I have with anyone else.
Oh.
But it felt like that from my first performance with her because I had something to bring. I wasn't being broken in to a sort of Broadway schedule, and she just allowed me to, you know, make a mess. And I knew that if I tried something, that she had my back, in a sort of way. So it's sort of easy to let go and allow yourself to fall in love with someone and to look forward to that on the stage.
Yeah.
If you're playing opposite and that wasn't the case with everybody I've done it with. It just happened to work out that way. And so I think that's maybe why the story plays, our particular love story plays the way it does, just because of our own personal experience outside and with each other.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's a real trust
Yeah.
that happens, and you know, you need that. I feel the same, that, you know, anything that I were to throw at him, he would,
He'd be there.
he'd be there, yeah. It's a great relationship.
Well, thank you. So now, if you'd like to ask the question.
Well, thank you. I've actually seen you 10 times so far. It's been in the line of duty, but it's been a pleasure every time.
Thank you.
And this follows on from what you were saying before. I've noticed, I've kind of got the dialogue memorized, and I've noticed that you do have, from performance to performance, changes not so much in the words, but in the inflections, the timing, and Billis as well is kind of noteworthy for this. And I'm wondering, is that because of the audience being different each night, or is it because you just want to try something different?
It's in the moment.
It's in the moment. There is a rhythm that comes naturally when you've got music that's coming up, and there's a rhythm that you have to kind of stick to. But I don't think it's so much the audience as it is the person that I'm on the stage with. If they give me a look or a different glance, and it brings something different from me. And that's why I love live theater, because it is something brand new and fresh every single time. And that's a challenge, but once you're able, what we were talking before, once you trust the people that you're with, it's so fun to be able to live it every moment as it should be.
It's actually a testament to, I think, how much fun it is to work with these guys, because in the past, and I'm sure you all have similar stories, there are certain actors who approach it a little bit more robotically, a little bit more like, this is my job, this is the place that I stand, and these are the lines that I say, and
Like a switch.
yeah, like you switch them on and you switch them off, and no one in this production is really like that, and it's a real blessing, especially when you have to do the show now over 500 times. So yes, it changes, and I think for me the audience does come into play, especially with certain jokes or things that people find funny, things that people do not find funny. But for the most part, it's about the openness of the person you're on stage with.
And I think, sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
I think it's also a testament to Bart, because every time he does keep a good eye on this, he comes back and he said, okay, forget everything I said. And he messes it up all the time. So he gives us that freedom to make it fresh every single night, which is just, it's a gift.
And once in a while, it's because you have been saying the same word like 500 times, and as it's coming out of your mouth, you're like, that sounds so weird. Did I say Billis to Bore Ceremony, or did I say Bore Ceremony to Billis?
Yeah.
Or, it's a sort of a strange phenomenon to do a show 500 times, or however many times we do it. So sometimes that plays into it too.
Last night, actually, did you notice this, David? Last night, I say, oh, that's funny, you want to help me? Like the fellow who says he lives on an island all by himself, doesn't worry about anybody, and I'm supposed to name Japs, Americans, Germans. That's it, that's all I have to say. But for some reason, I thought, oh, I don't say Americans here because why would I say Americans? I'm naming all the enemies of America.
And you kept walking away.
Yeah, this is going through my head. And then I started thinking, well, what are all the enemies of America in World War II? And I said, well, I don't say Italians. I know I don't say that. So I'm thinking about this as I'm saying the line.
Did I come in?
No, I eventually just went, Japs, Germans, yeah. But I'm supposed to say Americans, but for some reason I thought that was wrong. And I was like, that's wrong last night.
Maybe that's what she was hearing.
You were very convincing.
Oh, thank you. A lot of times it's mistakes, is in other words.
Well, like a week ago, I forgot what my daughter's name was. I said, you love, I was like, you love her?
Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, I did think it was interesting. You pointed out, it just hit me that you have some relationship with the characters. Each of you, let's see, Carmen, you're from Texas. You said, which borders Arkansas a little bit,
Yeah.
and David, that the fact that you said you have a wife who's Asian or something, and that was interesting. You know, what your twins are they boys or girl? Are they boy and a girl? Or?
Yes.
They are, and Anderson, that you're from Philadelphia, and you're asking from Hawaii is sort of in the eye, you know, Jody. But I wanted to ask Jody especially, what is that? I know there's always been associated with Hawaii, which in the film version was made in. What island are you from anyway? First of all,
Maui.
Maui. Okay,
Yeah.
I've been to the 4 islands. You know, that's the only Pacific islands I've been to, but the 4 islands of Hawaii. But I'm asked, but do you think do you feel at home with Bloody Mary? Do you think she fits in with, you know, being Hawaiian or?
Absolutely. I think there's something very special about being Asian American and from an island culture.
Because a lot of people were from Asia, descended from
Yes,
Asians that
yes,
live in
right.
Hawaii. I know that.
Right.
And other islands too.
My ancestors came from Japan,
Oh,
to
Japan.
work on the plantations in Hawaii.
Yeah, a lot
So
of
their
Japanese
history is
people.
very similar to hers,
Right.
to Bloody Mary's in terms of how they learned English. They learned English from, you know, with Chinese on their left and Filipinos on their right, and so,
Right,
you know. But yeah, absolutely. My family, I have aunties who still speak like that to this day. You know, that pidgin English. When I go back to Hawaii, I speak pidgin.
But, yeah,
So-
I know that. I did know. Yeah, that's how many you know, the Asian connection is very strong. Right?
Yes.
Indeed.
Thank you. Let the next person take over. Thank you very much.
You spoke earlier about how the director wanted to go back to the original play, and that's very interesting. But I'm wondering how much was the cast exposed a great deal to the original Ezio Pinza Mary Martin recording of the play?
Were we at all?
No, we were never.
I think there was an understanding that most people had heard it. I mean, I grew up on it, you know, and in fact, not only with the movie, but also with the original recording. And it was actually fun. I didn't, for me, I don't know, you guys can tell what your experience was, a connection to it. I didn't listen to the original recording until well into the production, and it was fascinating for me for a couple of reasons. One, to hear how different the interpretation is. I mean, if you listen to Younger Than Springtime, for example, on the original recording, it is strange, to say the least. I mean, just the style of it is so different from any way that you would sing now. And so you really have to pick and choose how true, you know, you're going to be to a certain style musically. But it's fun because also you get to hear the fact that we are getting to sing with the original orchestrations, pretty much, you know, with a few adjustments. But it's amazing because I feel suddenly really humbled that I'm getting to sing this original material with not a single electronic instrument in the pit. You know, we have a harpist, and so it's a very rare experience.
Thank you. Yes.
First of all, you all were fantastic. I've seen the Lincoln Center version, and I've also seen this version, and they're both completely different because each of the actors that were casted in their roles played them completely different, which is what's so great about it. But I have a couple questions, and it's always good to have an opportunity like this because, you know, a lot of people, when they see a show, they don't really realize how much actually goes into it sometimes, and especially being a theater major, that's what I love always, to hear the different experiences that go into a show. And so one thing that I realized when I saw it at Lincoln Center, I realized that the stage, you're very close, the audience is very close to the stage, and even here you're very close to the stage and the actors. And I was wondering if the set varies with each performance venue, because each performance venue is very different when you go into them. That's why I was just wondering if, you know, if there's still that closeness with each performance
This
venue.
production was restaged for the
For
proscenium.
each. Okay.
Because I don't know that on tour that we haven't done any thrusts.
No.
So, and the fact that floor retracted and exposed the orchestra, and the orchestra had their own choreography for the l'entr'acte. There are differences. But in terms of different, venues, it's really just about space. If we've got the space, sometimes the plane has been cut because the stage or the flies couldn't accommodate it. But the actual staging of this tour was designed to be in a proscenium, and it sort of has functioned, I think, really, really well in all the venues that I've been with on this tour.
There's someone behind you, and we have time for just one more question. So, yes.
Thank you. I came Tuesday night, and believe me, you had a standing ovation at the end. Everybody was just, overwhelmed. And I actually cried when you sang, "Once Nearly Was Mine." Oh, God, it was beautiful. You have such a gorgeous voice. And you're all wonderful. But I had this interesting story. 50 years ago, in Chicago, there was a Highland Music Center for the summertime, and I auditioned. And I got the part in South Pacific, and it was Liat. Things have changed. And now, 50 years later, I helped a fellow friend from Indonesia, where the real Polynesians and the real Bali is. And we are trying to help the women and children, fourth largest population in the world, to have a better life. So I just wanted to say, bringing this forward brings attention to other people's troubles, and we need to reach out to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We just have one person left standing, so it seems cruel not to let you
Well,
answer
I
the
think
question.
all of us who know the show from history know that Nellie was supposed to be a bit of an ingenue. That's how she's always been played, at least in our theater memory. And you said you really want to go in a different direction, and you hope that Bartlett would go with you. And I'm very curious to know where you got that notion. And number two, I know you're a Texan, and I don't know all the different Southern accents by state, but I know they do vary. And I was curious as to whether you actually learned what an Arkansas accent was, because it sounded, in all the Nellies I've heard, they've been kind of light and lilting, and you are really, really being Southern. Hi, and all that. And I was wondering what your point was behind that very, very Southern accent. Are you just trying to make a point that she is Southern?
No, I got the script and put all of my what I'd seen before aside. And so I just thought, I want to read the script first and see what I gather from it personally, and along with the story, along with the things that she chose to do. She chose to go to this island and to serve her country. First of all, that takes, can I say balls? Gumption. That takes balls. And so I think that she had a lot more strength about her than I had seen in the past. But also, I read the script, and the way it was written, to me, was very of a Southern nature. Like, in my whole life, and just all these things that she says. It's from a wittiness, a funny kind of place, but of a Southern mentality, completely. And that's what I wanted to bring to her. And luckily, being from Texas and being around a lot of Southerners, I didn't study necessarily the Little Rock, Arkansas accent, but I just wanted to bring that to life, because I just felt that would, ground me in what I wanted to accomplish with that part. and just ground the character in general.
Well, I wanted to just sort of bring this full circle. You've all been very generous with your time, and you've asked some wonderful questions. That it seems to me that this production, in some ways, is more fully bringing this play to life than it even could have been done in the late 1940s. And I just want to thank you all, the director, the whole production, but especially the four of you, for doing that for us. Thank you. And thank you all for coming.